Never waste a good crisis. And when it comes to the economic crisis, don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
The way we're going to win over the long term is not just militarily. We've got to win over hearts and minds. And what that means is we've got to invest in countries that have no educational infrastructure and have no means for young people to get ahead. We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Stay tuned for politics and religion.
Well, there's a very interesting development coming from the nation of India. The Indian government has established its own body to monitor the effects of global warming because it cannot rely on the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The group, headed by its own leading scientist, Dr. R.K. Pachari. Now, he is from India, but the Indian government realized he has done such a poor job, and the message of the International Panel on Climate Change has been so absolutely untrustworthy. They have pushed the idea of global warming even when there wasn't any global warming. The ClimateGate emails, and then they put out the word that the Himalayas, the glaciers were melting and would be gone by 2035. Well, now the scientists say, oh, maybe in 300 years, but not in 25 years. And then the Amazon rainforest, those are all going to be gone. No, not true either. Well, the mistakes just go on, and they haven't really been mistakes. They have been purposeful distortions for the purpose of giving the globalists a reason to establish world law. That was behind the whole thing. These people have been willing dupes as long as the money kept flowing, and so that's what in fact happened. Let me tell you a little bit more of the story. The move is a significant snub to both the IPCC and Dr. Pachari as he battles to defend his reputation following the revelation that his most recent climate change report included false claims that most of the Himalayan glaciers would melt away by 2035. Scientists believe it could take more than 300 years for the glaciers to disappear, and they could even end up coming back stronger than ever. In India, the false claims have heightened tensions between Dr. Pachari and the government, which had earlier questioned his glacial melting claims. In autumn, its environment ministers, Mr. Jarani Ramesh, said white glacial melting in the Himalayas was a real concern. There was evidence that some were actually advancing despite global warming. So some of the glaciers were advancing and not melting. Dr. Pachari had dismissed challenges like these as based on voodoo science. But last night, Mr. Ramesh effectively marginalized the IPCC chairman even further. So Mr. Pachari, the head of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, said that his critics were really guilty of voodoo science. Now the voodoo science is obviously coming out of his office and from the United Nations. You know, the Copenhagen thing, that was all a hoax. Nothing to it. Spent millions of dollars. Our officials alone spent $1 million just flying there, living in the nicest hotels, eating the finest food, drinking the most expensive booze. Our officers, our politicians, they did that for nothing, because all of this coming from the climate change panel was false. They're talking about it's going to, even at the Copenhagen meeting, Al Gore made a statement that the Arctic would be melted possibly within the next 20 years or so. And the very scientists that he claimed to quote came back and said, I didn't say that. I mean, these people are not scientists. They are evangelists for the cause of one world government. As a matter of fact, this article says there is a fine line between climate science and climate evangelism. I am for climate science. I think people misuse the IPCC report. The IPCC doesn't do the original research, which is one of the weaknesses. Continuing on, I respect the IPCC, but India is a very large country and cannot depend only on the IPCC. And so we have launched the Indian Network on Comprehensive Climate Change Assessment. That's INCCA. So quite a startling development here. We don't trust the International Panel on Climate Change with the United Nations anymore. We're going to do our own work before we bet the farm on this, before we buy into a one world governmental system based on CO2 distribution. We're going to do our own work.